Hey there, welcome to the Camden Famous podcast. I'm your host, April Shaw-Beaudoin. Whether you're a local, a seasonal visitor, or just curious about Mid-Coast Maine, you're in the right spot. We dive into the stories behind the must-visit places, from cozy eateries and unique shops to can't-miss attractions. For more insights and to join our community, check out our website at camdenfamous.com or follow us on Instagram at camdenfamous. Let's explore the best of Mid-Coast Maine together. The Camden Famous podcast is brought to you by The Wharf at Lyman Morse. The Wharf is a beautiful waterfront destination on the sunny side of Camden Harbor. The Wharf at Lyman Morse offers a one-of-a-kind dining, shopping, and lodging experience. Plus, don't miss the sunset over Camden Harbor from the Salt Wharf, their rooftop restaurant and bar. Visit thewharfcamden.com. That's the W-H-A-R-F Camden.com to start your adventure today. Today we're thrilled to be joined by Will Timms and Brett Haynie, owners of the Norumbega Inn. The Norumbega is the only castle in New England offering overnight stays. Will and Brett bought the inn in 2022 and they've done some pretty incredible renovations. In today's episode, we'll be learning about what made them decide to undertake such a project, what they're planning next, and you'll want to stay tuned to hear their hilarious answers to what they don't want to be famous for. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks so much for having us.
Well, I'm excited to dig into the Norumbega. The Norumbega is right up the street from me. I drive by every day. It makes me so happy. Every morning, the sunrise, is over the harbor, and then I see your beautiful stone castle. And I've featured you a whole bunch of times on our social channels and our stories, and I'm just delighted that you joined us on the podcast today. So,
thank you.
We would love to hear. So, Brett and Will and I have talked a few times in the past, and I know a little bit about your story, but I'd love to share with listeners who don't know. How did you land here in Mid-Coast Maine and as the owners of Norumbega?
I used to vacation in Camden, Maine with my family when I was like a teenager, college-aged. And then Brett and I visited Camden together in the summer of 2020 when we were escaping New York City COVID lockdown. And COVID sort of sent my mind reeling around like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I had always been hankering to sort of move back to a small town. And so when I started looking for inns, we obviously looked in Camden, and luckily for us, the Norumbega was for sale.
Yeah, and you have a little bit of experience. You're an architect.
That's right. I had been working for a real estate developer for a number of years in New York City, and the last one that I worked with, I helped them build a couple of new hotels. So while I've never owned one or operated one myself, I was working with the people who do operate the hotels to figure out, okay, if we're going to design this thing, how do we make it like really appealing aesthetically and functionally, and have it make sense from an operations perspective. So we're avid travelers. So Brett and I were always staying in cute little hotels and like basically stealing ideas from them for our own without really realizing it at the time. And so, yeah, we just decided to put that to use for ourselves.
That's awesome. And Brett, were you hoping that he was going to build a hotel when you were thinking about?
Oh, goodness, no. When Will and I met, he was at the beginning of his last project. And so I really did see this hotel build itself from the ground up. And then we went to stay at the hotel afterwards. So it was very cool to see the thumbprint of a building that had not been there. And Will's thumbprint was all over it, which was a little overwhelming emotionally.
Really?
But I think that it was just too grand of a scale for us. So when the Norumbega, it kind of fell in our laps a little bit, and it just felt like the perfect, combination of all the things that we were looking for.
Yeah, and you've done some major renovations.
We did. I mean, we were lucky. The bones of the hotel were in pretty good shape. All the millwork inside the hotel, which is really what sets it apart from a lot of other things, was in great shape. But it hadn't been updated in probably 40 years. Literally, like the same fabrics were on the furniture that had been there when it first became an inn.
And we have the photographs to prove it.
Yeah. So yeah, we sort of did a top top to bottom renovation and touch basically every surface of the Norumbega to sort of infuse it with new life.
Yeah, and it is so gorgeous. I've
Thank
got to
you.
go in a few times. One of the things I definitely want to talk about, we're recording this podcast in March, but it will come out in June. And so I know that, is it late April or late May through November that you have a beverage and dinner service that you offer to the public?
Yeah, we did it. We didn't have it our first year pre-renovation, but then after the renovation last summer, we started this restaurant service. We were lucky that the previous owner had gotten a restaurant license for the Norumbega, which it had never had before, which allows us to let the public in to eat with us. And yeah, it's sort of driven by when our seasonal staff gets here, which is a process I don't totally control. But when they get here in late May, hopefully, then we will restart the bar and small plates restaurant service. And we're thinking we're going to do it 4 nights a week this season, so a little bit more than we did last year.
Yeah, and should people make reservations when they want to?
We would say yes.
Okay.
The space is very small, and once you see the property, you will understand there's a lot of desire to get in. And so we just want to make sure that we provide you with the best experience possible, and that's going to be by having a reservation so that you know that table is going to be there waiting for you.
I will say, though, I'm in the process of trying to hire a bartender. And I was the bartender last season, and it was a little scary for me to just open it up full-fledged and like potentially get slammed at the bar, or just like we just aren't really staffed for that. So we might be a little more lenient with walk-ins this year, as long as I can find a bartender.
And you have a beautiful deck off the back
Yes.
of the Norumbega. And how many people does that seat out there?
It seats around 20 people.
20 people.
Yeah, around 20 to 25 people.
It's just the most gorgeous thing in Camden from my perspective.
Thank you, April.
And I've got to be in a few places, and so it's really special. And
Thank you.
really recommend locals or visitors to give them a call and get a reservation. You won't regret it. Most recently, we did a blog on Camden Famous about 5 famous facts to know about the Norumbega. And one of my first facts that I had to share is it's the only castle in New England offering overnight stays. And that's something that's so special. And you also offer weddings. Do you want to talk a little bit about your wedding offering?
Yeah. We're so lucky because the Norumbega, the castle sits on 4 acres of beautifully manicured lawn. And we're able to host weddings during the high season of up to 150 people, tented weddings on the lawn. But the house is also perfect for smaller weddings, like if someone, maybe it's their second marriage and they're just inviting their closest friends and family. So say the house is really perfectly sized for an event of around 40 people. We can sit 40 people for dinner. You could have an event on the terrace and then move inside for a dinner. So we're really excited. We've got some weddings booked for this coming season, and we're definitely hoping to build that part of the business.
Oh, I can't imagine a prettier spot.
Yeah, it's definitely romantic. It lends itself to that very well.
And do people meet with the two of you when they're deciding, or what does that process look like?
It is, we basically get a lot of inquiries via the website, or just people reach out to us via email, and we basically respond to them with sort of the parameters of what it looks like to get married there, and then we sort of go from there. And if they like what we have said, and if it's in their price range, then we'll schedule a call or set up a tour. And then they can come by. Most people who inquire are people who live in Maine and, like you, have been driven by the house their whole lives and would just love to have their special day there.
Yeah. I feel like people are going to meet Brett and they're going to be like, can you be our wedding planner?
Oh, goodness. That is definitely not something I would recommend.
And then they're going to get stuck with Will.
No, Will is definitely more of the events coordinator. He has more of a brain for that than I do, I would say. He's definitely more organized, but he's also not a wedding planner.
Yeah, we're learning a lot.
And Brett, you do have a very creative past, though.
I do. I studied musical theater and opera performance in college. And then I moved out of that realm and I was a personal stylist. I still do personal styling on the side, but I worked in corporate merchandising for a few fashion brands. And working in fashion merchandising, it really did help us when we were decorating the house. We, of course, worked with the designer, but the art package we kind of sourced ourselves, and we really did accessorize the hotel largely ourselves. They did also help with accessory packages and whatnot. But once they left, it was really kind of up to us to make sure everything was in place. And that's something that I'm definitely really proud of. And, the guests, they like to move things around and read the books. And so we'll always have a stack of books in the office. And Abby, our innkeeper, she thinks it's hilarious because I know where every book goes in the hotel. And there are thousands of books in that hotel.
That is great.
Yes.
And Will said that you had a whole room in your house.
We did, yes. So what is now Will's office was the accessory closet, not quite the Vogue accessory closet that we all dream of, but the Norumbega accessory closet. And each shelf had a label with the room that I knew, this was the design process for that room. And these are the accessories that are going to fit, just so perfectly in. And so when it came time to actually move in the house, it was a very easy process. Just we put them there and deployed them, and it was it was really fun. Actually, that was probably one of the more fun aspects of the design process.
Well, and people really respond to it. Like I just heard someone yesterday talking to their spouse, and they were saying, "Oh my gosh, it's like every time I turn around, there's like another little surprise or thing that I noticed that I'm like, oh," and they can tell that there was thought put into the things that we purchased. Like Brett and I literally scavenged all the antique stores in the area and the bric-a-brac shops, and like every weekend we would buy like another selection of like vintage stuff and vintage art that we felt like worked with the sort of vibe we were trying to create. And I think people can tell.
Yeah, I can. I got to have a tour last summer, and I think my jaw was just on the floor. I had to carry it up the stairs as you showed me. Each room, it was just more magnificent than the last.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that people might not know about the Norumbega? Even people who've lived here their whole lives, but definitely people who are visiting here.
Well, it's 140 years old, built in 1886, by a guy who he himself is really interesting and sort of served as the muse for us because he was not just a sea captain. Most of the people who built houses during that era of this stature where they were making their money by fishing the seas. This guy was an inventor. He was an entrepreneur. He was a business guy. And he was also a naturalist and had like scientific leanings. He collected rocks. At one point, there was a little, like an astronomy structure on the site meant like to look at the stars. He was very curious and he traveled the world, and he sort of served as a design muse for us, and we tried to he was in our minds, we were sort of making the hotel for him, or like how he might fill the hotel with things. So I think a lot of people don't realize that, and I think that also is why he built a stone castle on the coast of Maine as opposed to just a more typical clapboard New England style home.
There are some really beautiful details in that stonework, like massive crystals that are in these pillars that hold up the library suite, which I've never seen before in a stone structure. And it's not just one, there are several. And to me, I think that's why there's a good energy about the hotel, because I think he was really intentional with the materials that he chose. And I think that shows.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I think you shared previously it was owned by Haynie Carter III.
It was, yes. Who's another Mississippian like me.
Oh, that's so funny. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think Haynie Carter's father used to own like the biggest newspaper in Mississippi. And he was a prominent Democrat who grew up in a town about 30 minutes away from where I did in the Mississippi Delta. So interesting, just connection. And yeah, he was the spokesperson for the State Department during Jimmy Carter's presidency, which is when there was a hostage situation in Iran that happened at that time. And so he was on the news every night for months. And apparently a lot of like Washington, D.C. politicos were in the Norumbega at the time visiting, and there were lots of parties that occurred there and lots of kind of famous politicians.
Toward the end of his ownership of the house, he was referring to it as a pile of rocks, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's great. I actually was talking to Houghton Cotter the Fourth, who lives here in Camden. He's an author, and he said he spent maybe his junior and senior year, and that was his house. And he said that people would just show up in his living room, and they would be like, "Hello, tell me more about this place." And he's like, "This is my house. What are you doing in my living room?"
And that still happens.
But that was such a fun thing for me to try to imagine. Just, I can see why you have that heavy door where people have to buzz in to come in now.
Yeah.
So I think people would love to hear some of your favorite things to do in the area. And then also, if your guests are asking you, what should I do? What are the can't miss activities or shops or restaurants that you always share?
One of my first thoughts always goes to the Farnsworth Museum in Rockland. I think the art on display there is just world class, really. The Wyeth Center is just phenomenal. And we love sending our guests, and we love taking our friends there also, just to really show them how Maine did shape the landscape of American art. I think it's really fully on display there in a beautiful way.
Yeah. And I second that. We love the Farnsworth. We also, Brett and I, we tell our guests to do this, and we do it ourselves. We're always just setting out on a drive. And we often will give ourselves a lighthouse as the destination. But really the journey is what's so fun, because we're always discovering something new. The landscape is gorgeous. So we often send people to the Pemaquid Point Lighthouse or to the Marshall Point Lighthouse. And then with several really fun stops along the way, shops, little hikes, wineries. There's just so many things, so many little places to check out. Lobster shacks. Yeah.
McClune's. Do you send them to McClune's?
Oh, always McClune's.
That's the one where we send them.
I think it's the best one.
We agree.
There's nothing like it. I think it took us 2 years to discover it, and then we were like, we need to make up for lost time.
I'm scared. I'm scared of telling people about it though, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be overrun. Because once you see it, there's just it's so good.
There's nothing else.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favorite hike? If you two are going out for a hike.
We like Fernald's Neck.
Especially in the summer, because there's all those little, hidden entries into Lake Meganticook, just for a nice refreshing dip along the hike, which I hesitate actually to say that on this podcast. But that's a really, really beautiful hike. And the scenic views of the lake, I think, are also really beautiful there.
Yeah. We also love Beach Hill Preserve, and we love, what's the one in Rockport, just off of Rockport Village, that not a lot of people know about, where you end up at
the Harkness Preserve.
Harkness Preserve in Rockport.
We
is
just
such a
found
nice
that
hike.
one recently. And I think it's great because we saw toddlers on that hike. We saw grandpas on that hike. Anybody,
Pets too, I guess.
Dogs, yes.
Yeah, everybody can enjoy it. So that's a terrific one that I need to remember to share more about.
Yeah.
So everyone that I've had on the podcast, and really everyone that I talk to here in the Mid-Coast, agrees that it is such a special place. And as business owners, I would love to hear what you think is really special or unique about being in business in Mid-Coast, Maine.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is just, and this doesn't just apply to the Mid-Coast, I think it's kind of it applies to the whole state of Maine, is that people are genuinely friendly, helpful, and kind, and it really, and it feels authentic, and it feels good.
I would agree. There are several restaurant owners in town that we're patrons of quite a bit, that have sat down with us as we, plan to open up our restaurant, that have come, in 5 minutes, when we had an emergency or we needed something. I think that is genuinely shocking to us, having come from New York City, where, I don't think there's that big of a business community.
Or in New York City, you're strangers, and in Mid-Coast Maine, yes, you might still be strangers, but they're so totally willing to give you a hand and help. Like, it was just incredible. The sort of like reactions we would get from people, for no other reason than we ate in their restaurant and we're kind, and they've just given it right back to us.
I had Vicky Murray of Laugh Loud, Smile Big on last week, and she was talking about how she's had customers go out and get her butter or cream cheese or something for her cupcakes at the last minute when she's running out. Like it's just, I grew up in Southern Maine, and I do think that there is a Maine personality, but I also think there is a Mid-Coast Maine personality, and I love the personality of Mid-Coast Maine more than the rest of it. And I lived in Boston, I lived in the seacoast of New Hampshire, and it really, even in New Hampshire, where it's still a pretty small community, neighbors are not functioning as like people who want to join hands with you and help you cross the finish line.
Yeah.
It's more of a rat race. And,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, New York is like a whole different thing. So it must be such a breath of fresh air.
It is. I feel like Camden is this sort of small town that like it doesn't exist that much anymore. And it's not just the way Camden looks, it's the way it feels. Like I agree with, there's just something about like the people here that's just so heartwarming, and just again it feels authentic in a really great way.
I completely agree. And so as we kind of close out the interview today, I would love to hear from you, because this is the through line. And Will and Brett, the Norumbega is in the coffee table book that we have for sale this summer. And we did a big feature on them. So they've answered this question a few different times for us. But what would you say that the Norumbega is famous for? Maybe before you came and were the owners, and then kind of now. What are you developing?
Funnier anecdote. The hotel was known for some murder mysteries that had been put on through the 80s and 90s. And we do get a lot of inquiries around these murder mysteries. But I think we've decided that we might want to be known as more of a romantic getaway than perhaps a murderous. The setting of a murder plot. So that's definitely an inquiry we get a lot, and the direction we're moving is more romance than murder.
That is the best. Do you have a different answer, Will?
No, I don't. I actually think that's great. And I agree with you. We're trying to shy away from ghosts and murder. Although we did have some lovely ghost hunters in the house who are like some of our most fun guests. So you're allowed to come in, but it's just not what we're promoting. I think the other thing that we're going to try and change is that like I said, people are so intrigued by the hotel. And I think a lot of local people feel almost even a little intimidated by it. It's never been a place that like was that welcoming to people who either didn't live there or weren't staying there. And we're going to try really hard to do more community focused things at the inn so that you don't have to stay there to come enjoy it. We had a holiday market last December that was so well attended and people loved it. And there was 300 people that came through the house that afternoon. And we're going to try and do more things like that. So we're excited about that. Welcome the community in.
Well, a fun fact about Will and Brett is that they don't listen to podcasts. But I just have to point out that you would never know that, because they are some of the best guests that we've had on all season.
Oh,
so thank you so much, both for being here. Is there anything else that we didn't cover today that you want to share?
I don't think so. I mean, I would like to express my thanks to you
very much.
We're so glad that you guys are here, and we are so impressed by what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And so grateful that you've been so supportive of what we're doing.
Well, it's been a joy for me. And before we do close, where can people find you online?
We're at norumbegainn.com.
I thought you meant out in the wild. I was like, Franny's?
Curator? At our website, our Instagram, which is just at Norumbega, is where we post frequently and updates around what we're doing. And if there's changes to the restaurant hours and things like that, you can usually find the latest stuff on Instagram. Although we update our Google profile frequently. or they can always call us. That's another thing. Sometimes that's the easiest way, and there's usually a person there, and we're really friendly, and we're happy to
we do answer the phone,
Yeah.
and we do respond to voicemails very quickly. And I think people are afraid in this day and age to call or to leave a voicemail, but we love it. So always give us a call.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To learn even more about what makes Mid-Coast Maine so special, visit our website at camdenfamous.com or head over to Instagram where you can find us at Camden Famous.